thebooksmart.com/chapter 7. Starting point. The next time your child wants something, enthusiastically request that he use words. One word, one sound, or multiple words, depending on where his language is right now. Resist the urge to act upon your child's other signals, reaching, moving your hand, looking at what he wants, and be persistent in your request for language. Believe in your child's ability to speak, or speak more. Then, make sure you pause and leave space for him to speak. Also, make sure your child's immediate environment is arranged so that he cannot simply retrieve everything that he wants on his own. Remember, it has to be worth your child's while to speak. Chapter 8, Fundamental 3, Interactive Attention Span. Let's acknowledge one thing. Your child probably has an awesomely long attention span. After all, if your child isms for hours, that's some quality attention span. So attention span is not the issue. Interactive attention span is. What's the difference? Ladies, those of you who have a male significant other, I'm sure many of you have noticed how your man seems to have a perfectly healthy attention span when he takes some reading on a bathroom excursion or when he's watching a game on TV, but when you want to tell him about your day, his attention span suddenly shrinks to about 60 seconds. You see how very different those two types of attention span feel to you? Attention span simply measures how long your child can stay involved in an activity. Interactive attention span refers to how long your child can stay involved in an interactive activity with another person before your child disconnects, isms, etc. Your child's interactive attention span may be 30 seconds, 2 minutes, 15 minutes, or possibly even an hour. Here's the thing. If your child's interactive attention span is low, especially in the 30 seconds or 2 minutes category, she can never learn to participate in a bona fide social interaction. You can't have a real conversation or play a game in 30 seconds, but interactive attention span is a highly malleable skill. And as your child's interactive attention span increases, it will create a positive feedback loop whereby longer periods of participation lead to increased interest in what other people are doing, which in turn builds a longer and longer interactive attention span. Isn't that terrific? You will want to become very aware of your child's interactive attention span. Start to keep track of how long your child spends engaged with you in any activity. Keep in mind that if your child is isming, he's not engaged. If your child is not responsive to you, he's not engaged. Your child must be interacting with you or someone else, playing, talking, chasing, looking, for it to count as engaged time. Suppose your child is isming and you are joining. Suddenly, your child interacts with you for a minute. Then he goes right back to isming. You join again. Then he interacts with you for another minute. Then he resumes his ism. That's an interactive attention span of 1 minute, not 2. If a minute is the longest you get before the isming resumes, then that is what you are starting with. I want to emphasize that this is only what you are starting with. It tells us nothing about how much your child can improve or how much longer it will be in 6 months. If your child's interactive attention span is low right now, then you can actually see that as a good thing. It means that your child's abilities and deficits only reflect what he is capable of given his current interactive attention span. Think of how much more is possible once we lengthen it. Strategies. Once again, the joining and motivation principles provide the building blocks here. The more you join, the shorter the isming periods and the longer the interactive periods. And when you focus the interactive activities around your child's areas of strong motivation and interest, you will always get longer periods of engagement than you will without utilizing your child's motivations. Here are some other key ways to begin increasing your child's interactive attention span. 1. Include plenty of the good stuff. Find the part of the game or conversation that your child likes and include lots of it. If your child likes the part of the chase game where you catch and tickle her, do more of that. If your child enjoys watching you fall down, drop to the floor more often. If your child loves it when you swing her more. If your child likes the part of the taking a trip game where the pretend plane takes off, make that happen more often. If your child loves talking about Star Wars, ask her a Star Wars question when her interest in the conversation starts to wane. 2. Keep coming back to your game or activity. Many parents are afraid of their child losing interest in an interactive game or activity once they've gotten their child's attention and interest. Maybe you feel this way. Check in with yourself. Have you ever seen your child disconnect and begin isming in the middle of a game or activity? I bet you have. Hopefully you joined him, right? Right? Say yes. And then, possibly, he reconnected. So here's the key question. Have you ever, in this situation, decided not to attempt to engage your child in the previous game or activity because he appeared to lose interest last time? If you have, hey, don't sweat it. Most parents have done exactly the same thing. It is very beneficial to your child for you to endeavor to continue the same activity where you left off. When you have your child's willing attention again, after you've joined, you can say something like, "Hey, you know what? We still haven't finished the game. It's your turn." Or, "I'm so glad you're back. We're almost up the mountain." Or, "I'm so excited to hear your answer to the question I asked you before. What is your favorite animal?" 3. Invite your child to come back to the game or activity once. Just as important as being willing to reintroduce an activity is being willing to let it go. Have you ever found yourself so excited to have your child engage with you in a particular activity that when your child disconnects, you miss your child's signals and keep trying to get your child to stay with the activity? If so, I promise you that I have yet to work with a parent who has not done this, so you're in good company. In practice, though, this type of pushing breaks down the rapport and trust that you have painstakingly built. So, when you're in the middle of an activity with your child and you see her beginning to disconnect, invite her to continue once. Make sure you do this in a fun and easy way, such as saying, Oh, it's your turn. Let's finish your turn." Or, "You silly goose, you can't drive the truck from over there. Come over here and take the wheel." Or, Wait, stay for 2 more minutes so we can finish the game. I'm having so much fun, we're almost done." Of paramount importance, though, is that you only do this once. If your child is not responsive, it's important to stop asking. At this point, bond with her by joining, being super user-friendly, non-demanding, etc. Activity time! This activity tracks interactive attention span. Spend 15 minutes with your child. Do your best to spend that 15 minutes playing some sort of interactive game. I would suggest keeping it very simple. Pick something basic you know he likes. Often, it's easiest to pick a physical game such as a chase game or wrestling. Remember, too, that you don't want to go in and deliberately pick a toy, object, or activity that your child does a lot of isming with. We're tracking interactive attention span, not regular attention span. You're going to begin to keep track of the types of interactive games or activities that your child sticks with the longest and the shortest. On a piece of paper, make 2 columns. In the first column, write down a few words that sum up what the activity was, such as chase game, building a fort, or checkers. In the second column, write down how long the activity went for. In other words, how long did your child stay involved before he disengaged, started to ism, left to do something else, etc.? Remember, you are not trying to be perfect by doing only games that will be wildly successful in engaging your child. The whole point here is to be a detective, to try several different things, and to start to notice what does and does not engage your child. If your child does happen to remain engaged for the whole time, yippee! Next time, you can try for longer. Online resources. For more in-depth help with the principles and techniques of this chapter, please go to www.autismbreakthrough.com/chapter 8. Starting point. Pick one game or activity and introduce it once a day for a week. See if there's any change in whether your child engages and for how long. Remember to introduce the activity in a fun but totally non-pushy way. If your child engages more with the activity by the end of the week, wonderful. If she doesn't, that's also great. Now, through trial and info, you know that this activity is not engaging yet for her. You can still try again in a month or two. Chapter 9, Fundamental 4, Flexibility. Before we discuss this most crucial fundamental in detail, let me tell you about Arturo. The story of Arturo. Arturo's parents were very pleased to have gotten him into a school that used the training and education of autistic and related communication handicapped children model, or TEACH. They thought that this school would provide a great alternative to ABA, which they felt had been counterproductive for their son. One of the aspects of the school that they really liked was that it claimed to respect the culture of autism. With this model, the school felt that everything should be built around what children on the spectrum already had a knack for. One of the key tenets of the school was that children on the autism spectrum need structure. I'm sure you've heard that statement before. Everything was conducted according to a clearly defined schedule. The children were taught this schedule in depth. They learned every single thing that happened at every single time throughout the day. They were shown pictures, PEX cards, for each aspect of the day and given as few transitions as possible, since, as the saying goes, children on the autism spectrum have a hard time with transitions. And in some ways, this system really worked. Most of the children in Arturo's new school became very proficient at following the schedule, and there were fewer meltdowns than at most special schools. So Arturo became adept at following schedules. But what happened when the schedule changed? Arturo's parents came to our startup program chiefly because of a significant challenge that lay at the center of Arturo's autism. He was very rigid and inflexible and prone to meltdowns. If there was a deviation from the schedule at home, Arturo would have a screaming meltdown. If they took a different route to the park, Arturo had a meltdown. If his little sister was around him for more than a few minutes, Arturo would have a meltdown. If anyone tried to get Arturo to play a different game than the one he wanted to play, or if anyone tried to change any aspect of the game he was playing, Arturo would refuse. He would play a small section of regimented games with his parents, but the games had to be played the exact same way every time. His parents and others often described the experience of playing with Arturo as not really playing, but rather as having to be a robot that Arturo controlled absolutely. For example, whenever Arturo's parents would try to do a puzzle with him, he would snatch all of the larger pieces away from them. If they tried to use a larger piece, he would grab it or scream. They would put smaller pieces into the puzzle, but only beginning at the right-hand side of the puzzle. Otherwise, Arturo would grab those pieces or scream. In the startup program, we taught Arturo's parents how to build their son's flexibility by utilizing Arturo's motivation and by giving them some specific additional strategies. When Arturo's parents returned home, they implemented what they learned, and they were elated to see the rapidity of the changes in their son. He hardly ever had meltdowns when the schedule changed or during transitions. He began to tolerate and sometimes play with his little sister. He became much more flexible within his games, allowing others to contribute and suggest changes. His repertoire of games and activities broadened considerably. Often, he would really play the games instead of having to simply repeat the exact same steps. Most importantly, people who played with him actually had the experience of playing and interacting instead of feeling like controlled automatons. One time, when Arturo's mom got his favorite puzzle out, he once again snatched up all the larger pieces. Arturo's mom gently put out her hand and said, "May I have one of your big pieces?" Arturo stared at her. She smiled at him and continued to hold out her hand. Arturo looked down at the puzzle pieces in his hand. He looked back up at his mother's outstretched hand, then back to the pieces in his hand. Then, with deliberate slowness, Arturo took his empty hand, plucked one of the big puzzle pieces from his hand, and held it out to his mom. His parents found that Arturo would, more and more often, be flexible and have wonderful back-and-forth interactions, which allowed his parents to arrange and then witness something that they had long been awaiting: Arturo's first playdate. why flexibility is so important. Flexibility is by far the most underappreciated of the four fundamentals. In fact, as in our churro story, most of us prize the opposite of flexibility, structure. Is it a bad thing for a child to know the day's schedule? Certainly not. But as with math, it is utterly beside the point. And as with math, it just helps our children to be better at being autistic. Remember, the rigid, structured part of your child's brain is just peachy. You want to work the weak muscle. You want to develop the part of your child's brain that's having difficulty. Then scores of doors open up for her. Realities to consider. There will always be changes in the schedule, as well as routes, routines, the order in which things happen, the meals that are served, etc. There will always be other people around your child, whether they be peers or adults, who want to have their say as to how a game is played, what activity to do, etc. A child who is different or who isms a little can absolutely succeed in school. A rigid child prone to frequent meltdowns cannot. Your life will be 1,000 times easier if you can do things with your child and with the family without fights and meltdowns. So will your child's. Every other area of your child's development is profoundly affected by your child's level of flexibility. Okay, let's take a few minutes to discuss that last point. The amazing thing about flexibility is that it doesn't just affect flexibility. For instance, let's say that your child is having difficulties with language. Now, certainly, there are cases where this is due purely to apraxia, difficulty using the muscles of the mouth to form words, and such a child will really need our help to build up the basic ability to form his mouth to make sounds. However, we see so many cases where a child says a word or a phrase with perfect clarity on Monday, but seems unable to say it on Tuesday. How do we explain this? After all, if the child has, for instance, low oral muscle tone or is completely unable to use language, how did he use it yesterday? This is where flexibility comes into play. Flexibility entails your child going your way. Anytime your child is being asked for anything, he is being asked to go your way. For most of our kids, this is very, very challenging. It is a relinquishing of autonomy that can feel really tough for a child whose world feels out of control and unfathomable. Most of the time, when it comes to language, if your child is not already fluently verbal, someone is asking your child to speak. This may be overt, say water, or more natural, which toy do you want? Either way, when it comes to the vast majority of instances, speaking requires your child to go someone else's way. In other words, it requires flexibility. So, if your child lacks flexibility, then getting speech is going to be quite a challenge, even if your child already has speech capability. If, on the other hand, you address your child's flexibility issues, you remove a gigantic obstacle to language, and language is only one example. When you help your child to become more flexible, you remove an enormous obstacle to everything. Every other area of your child's development is free to move forward. Strategies. I know I've said this many times with respect to the other fundamentals, but it bears repeating one more time. You don't want to attempt to work on your child's flexibility when your child is isming, not looking, not responding, etc. Work on flexibility when your child is engaged with you. With that said, here are some flexibility building strategies. 1. Start by being super user-friendly. This means you being very flexible and responsive to your child. If she wants all the toy cars to herself and takes your toy cars away from you, let her have them. If she says, don't touch that, then don't touch it. If she wants you to stand on one foot, stand on one foot. This helps set the stage because it helps to build trust and to relax your child. 2. Explain it in advance. When there is a change or transition coming, dinner is later, we are changing rooms or activities, etc., explain to your child what is going to happen in a nice, relaxed tone. Also, briefly explain why. Example, hey, sweetie, in a half an hour, we're going to put our shoes on and get in the car. We have a dentist appointment. Do this again 15 minutes before and again 5 minutes before. 3. Get it wrong. If your child usually requires a game or activity to go a certain way, make a mistake and do it wrong. For instance, if the getting ready for bed process typically begins with brushing teeth followed by getting into pajamas, get out the pajamas first. If the puzzle always gets put together in the same order, try beginning the puzzle in a different order. When your child calls you on it, whether he does this in a verbal or nonverbal way, say something like, "Oops, I did it in a different way." You can add, "It's so fun to try things in a different way." 4. Role play. In a fun way, play out a scenario in which your child would usually have difficulty, such as a transition. For example, if your child has difficulty transitioning out of the house, play a game inside where you two pretend to get ready to go outside. Your child needs to be at a high enough stage in her overall development for you to be able to do this. For instance, if your child is totally nonverbal or only minimally interactive, you'll want to save this strategy for later. 5. Be silly. Normally, when something happens that is outside our children's comfort zone, we get uneasy and tighten up because we know what's coming. This makes things worse. Instead, when your child seems to get a bit agitated over a change, transition, or someone wanting to do something a different way than he does, act silly and goofy about it. If dinner is served early and your child is attached to having dinner at exactly 6 o'clock, you can say something like, "Holy moly, the wind is blowing me over to the dinner table!" Or, "I'm so weird. I'm eating before dinner time." You can also do things like bouncing over to the dinner table or falling down in slow motion as you go over to the table. Questions to ask, requests to make. It is surprising just how many opportunities we have, and often don't notice, to turn an activity that's already happening into one that challenges our children in the area of flexibility. It makes perfect sense that we tend not to notice these opportunities. No one ever tells us to pay any attention to our children's level of flexibility. Here are some examples of questions we can ask and requests we can make, as long as your child is not isming, that will gently challenge your child to be more flexible during any activity. That was fun watching you go the last few times. Now I want to turn. Oh my gosh, you have to try my game. It's so cool. I have an idea. Let's see what it's like to do it in a different order this time. Parking your car in that slot is cool. Let's try putting it in another slot now. You are right. We usually do have dinner at 6. If we could have dinner at any other time later than 6, which time would you want it? Yeah, I know you like your piece to be the blue one. This time, let's try a different way. What other color do you want to try instead? Activity time! This next activity is designed to be filled out over a 3-day period. On day 1, choose something in your child's day that you will do differently and invite her to enjoy it. For instance, change the time of one meal. Encourage your child to get dressed in a different order. Pants, then shirt instead of shirt, then pants. If there is a card game you usually play, change one rule, such as having each person get 2 turns in a row. On day 2, choose a different item to change. On day 3, choose another item to change. Remember to use the 5 strategies. In each instance, track what change you tried and how your child responded. On a piece of paper, make 2 columns. In the first column, write the name of the game or activity. In the second column, simply write the word yes or the word no according to whether your child agreed to the change or not. She can refuse a change by saying no or simply by ignoring it. Reminder, don't get caught up in getting all yes answers. Even a no helps to stretch your child's flexibility. Online resources. For some help with the principles in this chapter, please go to www.autismbreakthrough.com/chapter9. Starting point. Start practicing being silly in the face of change. Anytime anything does not go the predicted way, respond in a fun, easy, silly manner. If Aunt Maria doesn't arrive when she says she will, You can jump around exclaiming, "Woohoo! Aunt Maria's not here yet. Now we have 15 extra minutes to wrestle," or draw, play, etc. If your child wants food that he cannot have, you can pretend to eat his arm and maybe sneak in a tickle. There's no one perfect way to be silly, so give yourself permission to experiment. Note, these past 5 chapters will powerfully jumpstart your child's social and interpersonal development. However, these chapters are just the beginning of the Sunrise Program developmental model, not the end. We spend much time in the startup and advanced programs helping you to utilize the model step by step, including tracking exactly where your child is and implementing activities to bring your child to the next level. As noted in Chapter 5, you can download the full version of this model from my website. The 4 fundamentals of socialization are trackable and understandable because of the insightful model that Bryn and William Hogan developed, and I thank them heartily.